The last strategy that I'm going to run through in a similar manner with some detail is the management strategy. And obviously, as I mentioned before, it's usually preferable that if you go after this strategy that you've had some experience, obviously, either with your own properties or like we've talked about doing a house hack or doing a basement or even renting out a room, just having some sort of experience with putting your tools and your integrations in place with your Airbnb listing. And so you typically want to have some sort of experience. It doesn't have to be extensive to get started with this. Now, one of the things that we, as a part of the B&B investing program, we do quite a bit of work with real estate agents. So in Georgia, I actually do a CE, continuing education class for realtors. Real estate agents in particular have a unique opportunity to come across this on a daily and weekly basis with their current clients. And so there's a lot of real estate agents, given the recent changes back in July with some of the changes in the way that the commissions are negotiated, are looking for other revenue streams. And so there are clients that I do get set up on this management strategy where they're not necessarily had direct experience themselves, but what they're doing is they're relying on Diamond Edge Properties and my experience to get them started. And so that is an option, just to let you know. You can go after the management strategy as an option, even if you don't currently do short-term rentals already. We can arm you with everything that you need to know to walk you through this process. And as I go through some of these details, you'll see a little bit more of what's involved with it. But I'll take a step back and just make the comment that depending on, let's say you start with the acquisitions of the rental arbitrage strategy, it's always good to have this third strategy in your back pocket as an option. It's all about multiple streams of income. And especially if you've got opportunities that come to you when you get started with this, where people that know that you have experience, they may end up having properties that they need help with, that it's good to have this as another option in your toolbox. It's nothing to sneeze at as far as the potential revenue. And with little or no out of pocket on your end, you're able to start generating 25% of the short-term rental revenue right out of the gate and then on a monthly basis. So this is definitely one to, at least before you decide what direction you want to go to, also having a good understanding of what's involved with this option. So with that being said, let's look at when you're prospecting for different clients, what does that look like for management? And one of the more popular ones, and this has been around for decades, is, and we've touched on this in some of the other strategies, right? So you've got the vacation property types. Yeah, so you've got the other vacation property types like we've talked about before: beach, lake, and mountain. And usually these are the more profitable ones, right? And so if you can step into a property that's basically doing 15 to 20,000 a month in revenue, and you can earn 25% of that on one property, you're basically making as much as $5,000 just on one property per month. So it is an interesting angle, basically, as a prospecting option to go after. We've got multiple properties on Lake Lanier, for example. I already talked about the ones in Tampa that aren't necessarily on the beach. And we've got properties on Lake Lanier right now that we manage for other investors. And these are $1 million houses that cost 50 to 60,000 to stage and set up. And we step in and run the operation and basically handle managing the property and earn that 25% rental management fee on there. So 4,000 to 5,000 a month in revenue just for one property. If you've got a $10,000 a month as a revenue goal, it just takes 2 or 3 of these type of clients to hit that number pretty quickly. The other pretty common opportunity for this, or the type of client, are folks that are relocating, right? Whether they're new to the area, so they've either sold their house, they're moving into another one, and they want to do something with the house they're moving out of, or for whatever reason they're not selling it, or they're just looking at having a second home and they want to keep the other one as a rental. You've obviously got other reasons: job, relocation, divorce, but you've got the opportunity to step in and help those folks with those properties as well. One of my favorites, and having been in the same shoes, you have long-term landlords that are burnt out, right? We've talked a little bit about this before on rental arbitrage. They're evicting people. They're not getting their rent payments. They're having to constantly fix the properties up. And so this option to step in and give them another revenue stream that's going to have their property be in much better shape is definitely another prospect to go after in terms of being able to come in and show them the ability and the advantage and the value of doing short-term rentals instead of long-term rentals. Another big one, expired listings, right? So expired listings are typically properties that haven't sold because for various reasons, the seller might be overextended. They haven't been able to successfully sell it on the market. And so they are definitely a good candidate to look at alternatives if they have to keep that property and still have something that allows them to generate revenue. Another great opportunity, and a lot of you can relate to this, is real estate fix and flippers, right? There was a time, and this happens occasionally in the market with fix and flipping. You do this great rehab, property looks awesome, it's in a great area, and you put it up on with your realtor, get it listed, and you don't get it sold, right? Or you don't sell it right away. We've talked about some of the carrying costs that are involved with rehabs. So every month that goes by, it doesn't matter if you're rehabbing or not, or you're finished or you're trying to sell, you still have a monthly interest payment to make and other bills to pay on a monthly basis. And so to step in, even as you finish your rehab for the investor, and you got to stage the property anyway, right? If you're listing it. So we've done this multiple times where you can come in and provide for that investor the option to help them stage and set up the property, but obviously stage it as a more fully equipped house to handle taking in guests with a fully equipped kitchen and supplies and towels and sheets and everything, with the ability basically to also list it on the MLS and manage your calendar around showings. Right? You're typically with short-term rentals going to have 3 to 4 guests a month coming and going. And so you can very easily coordinate your viewings around your checkouts and after your cleanings are done. If you have a property that needs to be on the market for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months longer, in the meantime, you've got a solution that's generating revenue while the property is listed for sale. And now that you've got an income stream for that investor so that they're making income. Now, the other thing too, it gives them an immediate plan B if for some reason the property doesn't sell, like some of the reasons we've talked about before, and they end up deciding to try to keep the property, get it refinanced into a longer term loan, and then you just keep it, they keep it as a short-term rental long term. We've had many instances of that. That's why I recommend if you're going after this particular goal is it's invaluable to attend a lot of the networking events like the meeting you guys have been at this week, and meet a lot of the investors that are doing fix and flipping and provide this as an option to them, because it's definitely one that is, you can definitely get a lot of opportunities that way. The other one that we've talked about already, that as a short-term rental manager, you can do a lot of networking with real estate agents. And real estate agents, for the most part, like most businesses, they want to stay in their lane. They're experts at what they do with working with sellers and buyers. And you can provide this as an option for them to refer clients to you that are in various stages of decisioning on whether they want to do short-term rentals or not, or they want to do it as a long-term rental. They just bought a property for somebody. They're looking at it as an investment. They want to look at options. So you can basically develop a network of real estate agents that you have a referral agreement with, where if they refer clients to you that you end up managing their properties, you can provide a $500 referral fee to that realtor. We'll run the market analysis for your client. You make the introduction. If we end up engaging and managing the property for them after the first month's activity, we'll give you a referral fee of $500. And at your commission level, it's going to be at a minimum $500. So you're basically just paying your referral fee out of your first month's management fee, right? So that works. We get a lot of referrals that way. And it's another quick way to gain a lot of traction with a lot of different clients. All right, so let's move on and talk about the process with management, right? So the process, not too unlike the others, but usually the starting point and the ability to look at this as an opportunity is you're going to become the expert in running the short-term rental market analysis and basically help that person decide if they want to do short-term or long-term, right? You're going to show them the difference in order to help them make a decision on what route they want to take. Now, obviously, with short-term, you're getting bigger return, bigger money on a net basis every month after expenses, but you also have that upfront investment we talked about. So you do have to walk that prospective client through that information, right? Long-term rental, you're not staging it, you're not setting it up, you're not having to pay for monthly expenses for utility bills. You're basically getting it locked into a lease. You get that monthly lease payment and you're done. Short-term rentals, you still have to come up with that upfront investment. It's going to take them X number of months to recoup their initial investment before they start getting their monthly net cash flow. There's a process involved with how you do that and how you present that. So with that in mind, you have to be able to understand how to develop a staging budget, right? And how do you determine on a 4-bedroom house, what is it going to cost and what's involved? What are the items that person's going to need? And so that's another thing we provide with our clients is a full detailed list in Excel that you're able to manipulate and change depending on the bedroom count. And you can actually provide that to a prospective client. That also gives them a list of the items in detail with links on where we typically buy items when we set up our units. And so not only is it kind of a budget, but it's also itemized down to the detail level of all the items that you would need to set up your short-term rental. Equally important, ROI, how many months is it going to take to recoup investment? And much like the rental arbitrage, you're going to need to demonstrate your experience, right? Some form of a track record. With doing this, there's various ways like we've talked about before on how to demonstrate that. A lot of our clients, when they're managing properties, they're a mentee of Diamond Edge Properties or B&B Investing Group. You can inherit the same track record and experience that we've had because we're essentially teaching you based on our experience and our knowledge. And so you can use that as your talking point for that. But as equally important as the lease with rental arbitrage, you also want to have a clear, defined management agreement. That management agreement is going to clearly define roles and responsibilities. What is the owner of the property responsible for or the client? And what are you as the manager responsible for? You want that clearly defined in your agreement. You also want clearly defined in there how often you're going to be doing your reporting, how often you're sending payments. Because when you manage a property, it's going to be, like I mentioned before, included in your existing operations. You're the one that's going to be on the listing. The money for that reservation goes in your bank account. And so there's a process involved basically with reporting that back to the owner. And ideally, that report, which we also show you how to do and can provide you a copy of, there's a monthly owner statement that you have to send out, right? And then that basically clearly defines, after all expenses, what your net number is that you have to send to the owner. And so that has to be clearly put in place. Most channel managers help automate a lot of what's involved with a notice statement. So we show you how to set that up as well. And that basically gives you a good outline of the process. Obviously, there's some ebbs and flows in there. There's communication back to the owner on key items. If you get any kind of major issues with the property that need attention, you want to make sure that they're updated of that to get it corrected, right? A roof leak from the rain that needs addressing. Anything like that that's major, you want to make sure that they're made aware of that as soon as possible so they can address it. So that's a key component of it as well. All right, so let's talk about the cash flow, income potential with this particular strategy, right? And the management report, so the market analysis. So you can charge anywhere from $250 to $350 as a short-term rental manager to run that STR market analysis, right? It's an expertise. It's something that even a lot of real estate agents are familiar with. And so the best way to vet potential clients in the beginning and to see how serious they are You don't want to be running around spending a bunch of time running reports if you don't have someone that's serious about getting something done. So the way to vet out a lot of that noise is to have a payment that covers your time that it takes to run that short-term rental market analysis. And so one, it tells you how serious they are. Two, the way you can position this is that that fee that they pay basically can be credited back off of the first month's activity if you end up managing the property. You get that reimbursed as a client, but it also helps them make a decision because they might decide to do something different, right? But it still allows you to make some income along the way. So that is one way to earn income. The other way is help them stage the property, right? You're going to be the expert at that. So staging and setting up the property, depending on the size of the property, you can charge anywhere from $1,500 to $3,500 to do that. A lot of the owners and investors that come to get your services don't want to have to mess with that part of the deal. So they want you to handle pretty much everything, right? There's expense in the time that you spend to do that. So you should be compensated. So that'll also be a part of the management agreement, which will be an option for the owner, right? So income potential, some of the higher end properties are going to be much higher than this, but just as a general rule, your 25% management fee is going to get you in that, on smaller properties, $500 range plus, to the mid-size 2,500, and then as high as 4,000 on higher properties. All in, that's going to be your cash flow income potential on the management opportunity. Like I said before, wanted to arm you with at least a little bit more details on each of the different opportunities. And that way it can help you be comfortable with what your decision is as far as what direction you want to go in as you pursue this opportunity. Questions out there? I see we have one. Why, as a management, do I need to do a staging cost for the owner? So that's a good question. If you've got an owner that's coming to you and they're looking for you as the expert for the short-term rental option, they're not going to know what's required to set that property up as a short-term rental. And so they're going to be looking for you to give them guidance on that. And so it's important that you have a good understanding of that and you're armed with how to provide that information, because basically that's a big part of their decisioning, right? So that's great. You can make 2 to 3 times the revenue on that property doing short-term instead of long-term, but there's some cost involved to get to that level to be able to stage and set up the property. So that's why it's important as the manager, not only to have the ability to explain that, but also have the ability to execute and stage and set up that property. Now, the exception to this, obviously, is people that may already have a property that's staged and set up. You might take on clients that have tried self-managing and they don't like it, and they want someone to manage it for them. Or they've worked with another management company. There's some management companies that do this remotely that don't do a great job. They charge a 10 to 15% fee instead of 25%. So you might have some clients that you onboard that already have the property up and running as a short-term rental. You're just basically coming in to take over. So that would be an exception. But in most cases, when you're talking to a new prospect, you're going to need to know and have the ability to explain to them what's involved with the staging and the setup. So I hope that answered that. Is the cost of the staging just for staging, or also includes us having to buy the furnishings? So when I say staging and setup, 100% of everything. When you're looking at a management situation, all of those expenses are the owner's responsibilities, not yours. And so staging and setup includes your furniture, your electronics, your TVs, your electronic locks, your outdoor cameras, your dishes in the kitchen, the pots, the glasses, every single item that you need to have that property up and running and functioning as a short-term rental. The beds, the comforters, the decor items, all of those items are what's included in the staging and setups. Everything that you need with an empty property to get it set up and ready to go and go live as an Airbnb listing and to get your first guest in there. That's what we're talking about, is having every single item accounted for to do that. And the cost involved to do that, obviously, if you're doing acquisitions and it's your property, then you're the one covering that expense. If you're doing rental arbitrage or a master lease, you're the one also covering that expense. But in the management option, the owner is the one that has to come up with that startup expense, not you. Just to be clear on that point. Percent fee going rate for the Charlotte region. Yeah. So the 25% management fee is a pretty generalized standard fee across the board in most markets across the United States and in most places across the world, frankly. The average is in that 20 to 25% range. There are some markets, like some beach and possibly lake markets, that are a little bit higher. And sometimes in the Caribbean, it could be in the 30 to 40% range because there's a lot more local things that need to happen with maybe you're providing personal chefs, you're doing a lot, you're picking up the person from the airport. So there's other things involved in certain markets that might cause that fee to be higher. But as a general rule, the going rate to manage a short-term rental is 25% across the board in most markets in the United States.